Hello again. My name is Frederik Harhoff. I'm Professor Emeritus in International Law at the University of Southern Denmark. Last time we spoke a bit about jurisdiction, and today we're going to speak about immunities and privileges under international law. You may recall from our last session that individuals are certainly the primary subjects of domestic law. So everybody who is present on Danish territory will be required to follow and abide by Danish legislation and Danish administrative laws. So that's the starting point. But do we accept exceptions from this main rule? And the answer is yes, we do, because some persons who are actually residing here in our country as well as in your countries, wherever you are, they are state agents. And so they represent another state. That could be ambassadors typically, or members of the diplomatic staff in an embassy residing here. So the Danish ambassador and the Danish diplomatic staff in, for instance, Sweden or France or Japan, they enjoy some kind of immunity, and they also enjoy some privileges. Why is that? Why is it that state agents should possess a special position compared to ordinary civilians? Well, the reason is exactly that they are agents of their state. That is to say, they are not the persons as such. They are the state personified in this instance by a Danish man or woman who has been appointed as ambassador to that country. And that also includes most of the diplomatic staff that has moved to, let's say, the Danish embassy in Tokyo, in Japan. There are a number of diplomatic staff there, and they all enjoy immunities. Because the idea behind sending out diplomats to foreign countries is for the diplomat, for the ambassador and his staff, to take care of his home country's political and legal interests. So if Denmark has an issue with Japan, or has issues that they would like to discuss with the Japanese government, then it is very practical to have a man on the spot, or a woman, sorry. Ambassadors may be, of course, both men and women, but it's important for Denmark to have an ambassador posted in Tokyo so that she can approach the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs or whichever Japanese authorities and raise the issue. And so the ambassador has to have complete immunity from all the areas where Japanese authorities might put pressure on her. So we don't want our Danish ambassador living in Tokyo to be prosecuted or pursued in any way by Japanese authorities. Not that I think that the Japanese would ever think of doing so, but the underlying interests here is to ensure and secure the complete independence of the diplomatic representatives that are representing our state. So that's why diplomats are state agents. And since Denmark is a sovereign country, entitled to respect for its sovereignty by all the other members of the international community, that is to say, the other states, the same goes for our ambassadors, that they also have to be offered the respect by virtue of the fact that they are representing their state. So our Danish ambassador is not just Mrs. So-and-so. No, she is, in this capacity, Miss Denmark or Mrs. Denmark, in the instance where she approaches Japanese authorities to take up some issue. Diplomatic staff enjoy immunity. For instance, they don't have to pay Japanese tax because if they were to pay tax, Japanese authorities could perhaps put pressure on them so as to pressure them to make promises to Japanese industry or Japanese authorities which otherwise would not be accepted by the Danish government. So it is better to have a diplomatic agent who is completely free of any possible pressure that the host country can put on them. That means they don't have to pay tax. Young men and women don't have to perform military service. Of course, diplomats have to abide by the normal laws of the host country. So I don't know if Japanese traffic is driving in the left or the right side of the street, but of course even diplomats have to follow the traffic laws that applies in Japan, and also all the criminal and civil laws that apply. That goes without saying. They have to perform just as any other citizen living on Japanese territory. The only exception is that they are privileged in the sense that they don't have to perform a number of duties that otherwise are imposed on anyone who lives in Japan, including the paying of tax and so on. So what happens if, for instance, a diplomat actually does violate the laws? If the Danish ambassador drives too fast in Japanese traffic, can the Japanese police then arrest her and put her to prison and put her before a Japanese court and prosecute her for speed driving? Well, the answer is no, because she is immune. You can't put your hands on her. She is in a way intouchable. She cannot be arrested. She cannot be put in jail. If she's met in the middle of the night being drunk, for instance, then the Japanese police can stop the car and politely ask the Danish ambassador or whoever it is to get out of the car and escort her back to her home, to her residence, and put her up, open the door and say, "Okay, madam, in you go," and whatever follows from here will have to be settled diplomatically. The Japanese authorities will then make a complaint to the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Copenhagen, where now the Japanese ambassador will approach the Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs in Copenhagen and say, "Listen, we're not happy about your ambassador because twice she has been taken driving drunk in Japanese traffic. So either you call her to order, or we will have to declare that she's a persona non grata and will be expelled from Japanese, and then you have to replace her with a new Danish ambassador who supposedly will behave well." And that goes, of course, not only if you're driving around drunk, but also if you commit crimes such as espionage, which is typically observed among diplomats because they use their special privileges in order to get access to information that is otherwise not available to ordinary people. So what happens if, let's say, a diplomat commits a crime while he's posted abroad on foreign territory? If, for instance, the Danish ambassador drives down and kills a Japanese civilian in the traffic, can the Danish ambassador then be prosecuted before a Japanese court for having killed by reckless driving in Japanese traffic? The answer is no. Then what happens is that the Japanese ambassador in Copenhagen will approach again the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Copenhagen and say, "You have to pull back, withdraw your ambassador because she must be prosecuted for a traffic offense in our country, which caused the death of a Japanese civilian." And that's what the Foreign Ministry will do. He will then call back the Danish ambassador and prosecute her before a Danish court, but she cannot be prosecuted abroad. So diplomatic staff is exempted. They enjoy immunity from execution and from prosecution, although they are fully obliged by the normal laws that apply in the country. Then the same goes for foreign military personnel who are based or posted on our territory. We have, for instance, in Denmark, a big American base up in the northern part of Greenland. There is the Thule Air Base, which is run by American authorities to help as a part of the protection of NATO territories on the northern hemisphere. The American soldiers on the American base in Thule Air Base, they have the same status as the diplomats. So Danish police cannot interfere with them. If they commit a crime, we will have to hand them over to the local American judiciary who is present in Thule Air Base. They have a judge sitting up there who can deal with whatever crimes the American soldiers are committed. And even sometimes we surrender our own jurisdiction, because if a Danish worker is working on Thule Air Base as a carpenter, for instance, then he may, in some instances, even also be put before an American court because he has committed a crime on American territory. Of course, it's Danish territory, but it is designated as under American jurisdiction. That's why the Danish carpenter who commits a foolish act on the American base will be covered by American jurisdiction as well. So you have a number of people living on your country who are entitled to immunity, that is to say they cannot, to executive immunity and judicial immunity. You cannot put them before a court, you cannot arrest them, and they have to be respected because they are state agents of their state. What about an ambassador or a military officer who lives here and who buys a summer house, for instance? And so this is a private property that happens to belong to a person who is immune and who enjoys privileges. Does immunity and criminal privileges extend to the ambassador's possession of a private property on Danish territory? No. So if the ambassador has a summer house somewhere in Denmark and fails to pay his taxes, then the Danish tax authorities can file a case against him, and in that case, that is a civil case which is not covered by diplomatic immunity. So in that case, the ambassador will have to show up in court. Can you compel a Danish ambassador to appear as a witness in a Danish court? That is subject to some debate. In principle, I would say, yes, you can summon an ambassador or diplomatic staff to appear as a witness in a courtroom. But if the person refuses to do so, then there's nothing that the host state can do about it. Then we have to skip that witness. So I think this is as much as we can say at the moment for individuals' immunity. And then what about property immunity? If there's an embassy on Danish territory, which there is, all the countries have embassies here, and we have embassies abroad. What about the premises of the embassy? Are they also immune? And the answer is yes. So local domestic authorities cannot enter the premises of a foreign diplomatic embassy. That is no-go. If they can ask the ambassador if they may come in, but if the ambassador says no, then there's nothing the local authorities can do about it. So embassies, the premises also suffer, they also enjoy immunity and protection from prosecution. What about a car, for instance? Can that be held back in case if the car belongs to the embassy? In principle, the car is also a state belonging. It belongs to the sending state. But here there are some exceptions that means that we can hold back a car that has been involved in a car accident, for instance. But and then what about ships? If a state ship comes into a domestic harbor abroad, state ships will normally be military ships, naval ships, warships, for instance. if a Japanese warship visits a Danish harbor, then when they come into the harbor, they are also immune immediately from any execution or whatever authority that Denmark has. So if, for instance, there is a murder on board a Japanese warship while harbored or port in a Danish port, then that is something that has to be settled by the Japanese authorities, and the Danish authorities are not allowed to interfere with that, unless the act on board of the Japanese warship has effects on Danish territory. Then the Danish authorities, of course, will have the right to at least play a part in the prosecution and investigation of whatever crime was committed on board the Japanese ships. So this concludes our reading of jurisdiction, individual jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, jurisdiction on the high seas, and abroad. Thank you so much, and we'll speak again. Next time will be on state responsibility. Thank you.